Now it was serious. A double dog dare. What else was left but a triple dare you? And finally, the coup de grace of all dares, the sinister triple dog dare.
I triple dog dare you!
It's me again. I hope you are not sick of hearing my voice and seeing my face. And if you are, well, that's your choice. But thanks for joining us again to the Growing Up Punk podcast, the podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. We're so glad you decided to join us today. We've got another awesome episode for you. Before we get to that, we would love to share with you how you can connect with us more, and you can do that on our website at growingpunkpod.com. There you will find links to our social media, our YouTube. You can read album reviews, check out our blog, see what we're watching and listening to, and just become more a part of this community. And so we thank you so much for taking the time to listen or to watch or to leave a comment, all that stuff. We really do appreciate it. So today's episode is one that has been a long time coming. I think it was about a year ago that I first started talking to the guys in Hangnail, and it just took a long time to come together. They wanted to, kind of have the whole band a part of it, and so there was just more schedules to work around and just things with COVID and just trying to work all that stuff out. So anyways, it's here. It's exciting. It's awesome. It was such a blast to talk to the guys. They were super rad. And it was just great to hang out with them and see them and talk about their band and experiences they had and also what they've been up to. If you listen to the end of the podcast or to the end of this video, you're going to hear/see a really cool surprise. And maybe you've already heard about it online or seen something about it, but they have new music out, and it's awesome. It's super cool, and I'm really excited about it. And so we get into all of that and lots more. So I really hope you enjoy my talk with the guys in Hangnail.
It's good to see you guys. I've said this lots as I've been doing this show and doing interviews. It's like my teenage fantasy coming to life, and it's awesome. It's such a weird thing. Time goes by and we all grow up and just things change with social media and technology, and it's not that big of a deal to just hang out with you guys. Whereas as a teenager, it would have seemed more impossible. And just I don't know if you guys even ever came up. I'm in Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm not sure if you guys ever came up this way or not.
No, never to Canada.
We never played Canada, and I have no idea why we didn't. I feel like there was like a few opportunities, and it just didn't happen, but I don't remember why. But
yeah, I think on one tour we were supposed to go up to Vancouver for something, and there was something about going across the border, and it didn't work out. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Vancouver is like 30 hours from me, so
yeah,
I'm kind of in the middle-ish of the country. Like, it's still considered Western Canada, but that's still a ways. But yeah, well, this is maybe even better than that. I mean, it would have actually. Did you guys play Cornerstone 2002?
Yep,
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, then I would have seen you there. I mean, so that was the year I graduated high school and went to Cornerstone, and it was amazing. Saw so many bands I can't even remember who I all saw. But if you guys were there, then I definitely would have seen you. So
I think we played twice.
Yeah,
okay.
I think that is the year we played twice.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, well, thanks guys for taking the time to do this, and this has been it's probably almost been like a year in the making from when I first sent you guys a message and just schedules, and I'm assuming some of you guys have families, and I do too, and sometimes, I mean, even just with COVID stuff, things are just kind of all over the place. So anyways, glad you guys were able to make it and take the time, and looking forward to getting to chat with you guys and hear a bit more of your story. Because so one of my favorite things about doing this is, lots of podcasts, at least that I listen to, they're kind of talking to a lot of the big name punk bands, and one thing I love about this, and so I'm not saying this as like a slight or anything, but there's a lot of bands, like you guys that, just don't ever hear about for whatever reason. And I know there's been lots of times since you guys were an active band and whatever, but I don't know. I feel like there's still stories to be shared, and I still hear from lots of people. It's like, man, like I love that band in high school or whatever. That was so cool that you got to talk with them. And there's even some guys like, I'm not sure if you guys ever played or knew the guys from the band Off the Record at all that was on Tooth and Nail. But,
no, we didn't play with them. We didn't know those guys, but definitely knew of their music.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so their guitar player, Ryan, like I had him on about a year ago, and we've been, talking back and forth and even like writing some music and stuff together now. And so it's just, a really cool opportunity to connect. So, but yeah, sweet. Well, let's get right into it. I wanted to start by just kind of asking you guys, what are your favorite or most like influential albums from the Tooth and Nail catalog? So either bands that were around when you guys were playing or before or since, even if you just want to even touch on like an album or two. It doesn't have to be anything super in depth, but I always just love hearing, kind of what bands influenced the bands that I love.
Well, I would say probably my big influence would be Life in General, MXPX. That kind of introduced me to I got you, Nick. That introduced me to the whole punk rock the whole genre, and it was just a great introduction, and it just kind of set it off from there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just to follow up that he stole mine. Thanks a lot, Jacob. Life in General was huge for me, but even Teenage Politics before that was pretty. That kind of got me into the whole punk rock thing, and then the Life in General hit, and Life in General was like, it was just like, oof, like I was just kind of, it was like just one of those life-changing records, so that was a big one. And then down the road, just if I could add one more, a big one for me was the Juliana Theory, Emotion is Dead. And that was probably, that was like 2000 or so. I think that came out somewhere in there.
Yeah,
that was a favorite. That was spun a lot.
Yeah, we listened to that one a lot in the van.
Yeah.
I think MXPX is the obvious one. We got to dig a little deeper here, but I think we need to also talk about Nick's old car that he had. He had a white neon with a big old Poking at Ya Punk logo on the back, which window. I remember rolling up. I think MXPX was playing at the rave, and Nick rolled up in the car. It was actually.
Oh, I love it.
But for me, I was actually a fan of the Tooth and Nail stuff from the beginning, with Wish for Eden, bands like Overcome, The Blamed, Blenderhead, stuff like that. And so a lot of that stuff, and you were kind of talking, Aaron, about how, back in the day you used to be kind of nervous, talking to a band or whatever like that. For us, it was kind of interesting because when we got signed to the record label, we started touring with some of these bands that we were listening to, and that was a really cool thing for us, guys that we looked up to, and now we got to play shows with these people.
Yeah, I was going to say Goaty Hook, the Sumo Surprise album.
For sure.
There was a lot of driving in Nick's minivan, listening to that album and Value Pack. As much as back to Value Pack now, and I'm like, I don't, not sure why I liked it so much back then, but it was super influential. I mean, it was. So I think those two got spun a lot in Nick's van.
I think I was at Mike's.
A couple more from you would be Slick. Would be Slick Shoes Rusty album. Rusty. Slick Shoes Rusty and Stave Sakers Speak Easy.
Yeah, so many good ones. Yeah, Rusty and Life in General, were huge for me. What's funny about a lot of these bands is, as me and my co-host and other guys have been talking about these, there's so much nostalgia in it. And I've heard a few comments like, those albums really aren't that good. I think it's, just in your mind. Right. I think of Goaty Hook, Sumo Surprise, and, I go back and listen now, and there's so much memory with it. I'm like, this is awesome. It's like, but this is pretty cringy at times, and it's not great, quality, I don't know how it stands up to some of their bands from that era, but I don't know. There's just so much attached with it that in my mind it's still amazing. So
I gotta say one more. The Craig's Brother Homecoming album, that one has stood the test of time. Now, maybe the
man.
production quality wasn't the best, but those songs are awesome.
Yeah, that's still one of my all-time favorite albums, and I recently got to talk with Adam from that band, and so that'll be an episode coming out too. And we talked a lot about that album, and so much cool stuff. And I mean, we'll kind of get to this as we go on, but it's just awesome that you guys got to be a part of that. And I know for myself and many, when I think of that era and all those albums, like Hangnail is definitely in there, and so it's just cool to for you guys to kind of be a part of that. So what I should have done to start was to get you guys to just say your name and maybe what you played in the band, just so people kind of have an idea of who we're talking with. So if you guys want to do that, that'd be awesome.
Sure, I'll start. My name is Mike Middleton, and I am the lead singer and the bass player in the band.
Nick Radovanovic, guitar player.
Matt Went, guitar player.
Jacob Dosmegan, drummer.
Yeah, right on. So if one of you guys, like, let's kind of get into, the formation of the band. How did things start? Like, I don't know if just one of you guys wants to take that away, but kind of how did the band come together? What was going on in your lives at that point? Kind of love to hear kind of how things first came together.
You want the long version or the short version?
Depends which one's more interesting.
Here, well, let me just I'll quickly start with just me and Jacob. Me and Jacob lived across the street from each other when we were real young, up until we were probably 12 or something like that. So me and Jacob, actually, I started playing guitar when I was 8, and Jacob started playing, I think, the same time pretty much, right? I would assume. And I would I would go to his house. I'd walk to his house with my wagon and my little PV amp, and we'd jam at his house when we were probably like 9, 10, right? I mean, somewhere in there.
9 or 10.
And so me and Jacob so we just kind of started, it wasn't Hangnail, it was just like we were just jamming. We were so young, and then we got into middle school, and then we met Mike, and then it just sucked from there. No, then Mike can take it. Mike, you can. Then we met Mike. So go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So, we all met in like symphonic band in middle school. Matt was also at Bowen School, and I met Nick and Jacob. We had played in jazz band as well together, and there was a talent show, and so we wanted to put something together, and that's where the stupidest name of any band ever came up, which was Hangnail, which we decided in 8th grade. And I don't know why we never changed it. One of my biggest regrets. But we played in a talent show. We played "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana, right? And what else did we play?
Yeah.
I forgot. We were big into Nirvana, Green Day, Weezer back then, those bands. So the three of us did that, and then we just started writing some of our own music. A lot of that would have been very cringy if anybody heard that now, but you got to start somewhere, right? And then eventually, Matt was a good friend of ours, and early on in high school, he joined the band. We just needed another guitar player to kind of play more of the parts that we needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how did things kind of progress from there? I mean, you guys are still pretty young and just jamming. Was it just kind of, you do that high school talent show and then you just kind of keep going, or how does that go from until you actually start playing like some real shows, and like kind of how much time is in there and what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it got a little bit started. We met some different people, and Mike, you'll have to refresh my memory exactly how we got down to jam and Java, but that was kind of a big thing for us. So we were in high school, and there wasn't a lot of places other than churches for like Christian bands to play. So there was this place down just south of the border in Illinois from where we lived in Antioch or Lindenhurst. And it was in a strip mall, and it was this kind of Christian coffee house, and they started having bands all the time. And I don't want to say we were regulars there, but we played there, quite a few times, and sort of kind of got I don't want to say a following, but people in the area kind of knew us after a while. So how exactly that all happened, I can't quite remember, but I know that was kind of a big deal for us. So.
Right. Yeah, well, we started out playing birthday parties and really small things and stuff.
My house.
And actually, one thing which I think helped a little bit in some ways, Lisa's gave us some money. We won the Kenosha County Fair Battle of the Bands contest that one year. Remember,
Nice.
all these young little high school like kids and all these adult bands were like all upset that we won.
Mm-hmm.
That gave us some money so we could start putting that into equipment. And I think we bought recorded and purchased some CDs at that time. And then we started sending those CDs places to get gigs. But yeah, like Matt said, we had opportunities to play at local churches. Word kind of spread, and sort of regionally we started playing more and more gigs as people heard about us.
And I think that during that point, like we got we would get on a gig with Goaty Hook at, we get these, we kind of get like into that, when those touring bands came through, we kind of got on some of those, like those coffee shop shows and that kind of thing. So that kind of helped too.
That's when we played with Chevelle once.
Chevelle, yeah.
Multiple times, yeah.
Yeah.
Before
how did you guys know that like shows were a thing? Like, had you like gone to a bunch of shows, or was, what was the scene like kind of in the town you were from? Like, how did you know, you play the talent contest, that's kind of one thing. How do you know that like playing shows is a thing at that point?
Yeah, I would say that actually the scene was pretty good in Kenosha at that time, and we weren't necessarily a part of that scene for various reasons, but there was a lot of punk and ska bands and stuff, renting out halls and playing shows and stuff like that. So that was definitely a thing. I feel like much more so probably everywhere, not just Kenosha, than it is now. Yeah, so just different, contacts we met along the way and whatnot.
Yeah, right on. And what about the songwriting? You started by playing covers. At what point did you start realizing, okay, like, we've got the talent or the ability to start writing our own stuff, and kind of how did that creativity flow into, your first kind of songs that you guys are writing?
Well, one thing I would say is, and I think most bands probably experience this, you look back and you write music, and a lot of times you think like 6 months ago, like, oh, that wasn't very good. You're always kind of looking back and improving. And we put out probably 2 full lengths at least of music before people really started hearing our music that much outside of our like school and stuff like that. And so, and Nick actually at the time, who does a lot of mixing and producing bands and stuff now, he was doing that stuff from his basement. And so I think we gradually built and developed the skills of songwriting. Like I said, if you heard some of our earlier music, I mean, granted, we were in like 8th and 9th grade. We just started writing songs right away. They were terrible. But they slowly got better because we put a ton of time. We practiced all the time. We recorded music a lot. And so we just kept doing it until it got better and better.
And was there a conscious decision, like at this point, are you guys thinking, okay, like we want to pursue this, we want to, be sending it out to labels? Were you thinking like, oh, we're going to be going to college, or kind of what was all kind of going on to form, from the kind of the beginnings to maybe we should actually pursue this, on a higher level? And what did that look like?
Well, we were putting together press kits. I forgot when that happened. Probably our junior and senior years of high school, and we were sending them out to record labels. That was back when you had a recording and you had like a folder and you put it in an envelope and send it off to a record label kind of thing.
Photo shoots and pictures and flyers of shows we played, stuff like that, to show that we had some sort of a following in a local area or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say we got a whole lot of response to that. For us, where things really, again, kind of a long story. I forgot what year it was. It must have been 97 or 98. We saw MXPX at Cornerstone, and they had played like the midnight show. And I remember I was with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And we had a bunch of demos, in a backpack I was carrying around, and just giving them out to people. And I don't know why bands always want to give demos to other bands. Because like we did that a lot, but people did that when we were touring and stuff too. And it's like, I don't know what you want me to do with this, but my wife wanted to give one of our demos to Yuri, and I was just totally embarrassed. I was like, no, we can't do this, whatever. But the most random thing is we saw MXPX play like, I don't know how much longer. I feel like a year later in Milwaukee. And we were talking to them after the show. And when we told them the name of our band, Mike was like, hold on one second. He went back on the bus. He came out and he was playing our demo in his like Walkman or whatever at the time.
Oh wow!
I love this stuff, and so there was that, and actually, I don't know if you knew that they had a record label, Rocket City Records, I think it was. MXPX did, or I don't know if it was Mike's label or MXPX.
Oh, Rock City, yeah.
Rock City.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of interested in us, and we had just played the new band showcase stage at Cornerstone, and so there were some other labels that there was some buzz coming, and that's when Tooth and Nail kind of came in and had showed their interest at the time too. So it all kind of came together right after we graduated high school.
Yeah.
And so you guys just kind of went for it when they showed some interest, or like how did that all come together?
I think I'm still going for it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, at that time we're 18, right?
You're 18. Yeah.
Like we go to see, I remember going to see MXPX in Chicago with like 6 feet under, 6 feet deep. Is that what they're called?
6 feet deep in Bride.
And Bride, and like it was my first like actual real. This was like early Hangnail. This was like 96 or so. I don't know when it was, but
yeah.
I just remember like going there, and there was a pit and everything, and I was in the front row, and it was just my first concert before that. My first big concert was Van Halen, so it was in an arena like setting, So when I went to this show, I was like, man, this is amazing. Like these guys. Like this is what I want to do, So I think from that point on, it was like, well, we can make this happen. Let's go for it. We're 18 years old. Who cares, right? So that was my thought behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I think once we really started getting some interest from labels, I think all of our intentions were to like go to college and kind of do the normal thing after high school. But I think after we started getting interest from labels that summer after graduating, it kind of planted the seed in all of us. It's like, oh, maybe we can actually do this and do this for a while and make a run at it. You know what I mean? So I think at least for me, that's kind of when it was like, oh, okay, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it now.
Yeah. So with the signing with Tooth and Nail, like you guys, were all the albums actually on BEC, or did any of them come out on Tooth and Nail?
Nick and I were just talking about this.
Yeah.
I don't even think I knew what BEC was at the time. All I knew is that Brandon Ebel had left a voice message on my answering machine at college, and my heart was like pounding through my chest. And I think actually BEC was just launching at that time, and I don't know who their first artist was, but we were one of their first artists. We had to have been.
Yeah.
And
I was curious with that because there was Project 86 and the Dingies and I don't really know why they put some punk bands on Tooth and Nail and some on that. So I was curious as if there was any explanation with that, or it sounds like it was just kind of their choice.
Honestly, we don't really know why either. That's a really good question. I think BEC was the division of their label that was going to be more focused towards the Christian market. And so maybe they saw more of that in our band than other bands or something, and thought that there was an opportunity there. But actually with our second release, Facing Changes, that was co-released on BEC and Tooth and Nail. And then our final release was Transparent, was just on Tooth and Nail.
Okay.
And I don't know all the behind the scenes of why, and I guess it didn't really totally matter to us because we were still getting the same distribution and all that as far as I knew. But
yeah. Was there any disappointment about not having that Tooth and Nail logo on that first CD?
I think so, a little bit. For me, anyway.
Yeah. I would imagine, that's, you're getting signed to Tooth and Nail, this dream label. And it's like, oh, we're actually, signing you to this imprint. And it's like, even if it's the same thing, same distribution and all that, like, I don't know, at least for me, like that label was so much back then, right? And I mean, I still listen to bands like you guys and that were on there because it was still associated, and the bands looked cool and sounded awesome. So it's not like it like hindered people from listening, but yeah, that's kind of interesting that they just kind of shifted those wherever. And what also interesting because the Dingies, and that Project 86 record weren't like overly spiritual or whatever. So that's a unique perspective of what they were trying to cater to. But anyways, it's kind of
I could be totally wrong on that.
Well, and I think especially later on, that's the kind of direction that they went. But anyways, so you guys sign. Is there, like a stipulation, like, okay, we want you to tour this much, or kind of what happens after you get signed? Like you go to record the first album.
It's actually strange. We actually recorded the first album before we got the record deal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and I don't remember exactly how it all happened, but I think we had a full length release and we were going to do it on our own. So we did it at a local studio here in town. And then, when we signed the record deal, it was all finished at that point, other than I think mastering.
Okay. So they just like kind of bought it off you guys or something, or how does that work if you already have it done?
Yeah, they gave us money basically to pay for our expenses on recording it, and then some money to buy a vehicle so we could travel in a trailer and whatnot, and we were off. So I think that would have been my sophomore year, fall of my sophomore year, when this all transpired, somewhere around there, or summer.
Fall in 99,
yeah. And then right in 2000, we started touring, and we toured hard for 3 years.
Oh wow. And what was that like, kind of on you guys, that you wanted to tour that much, or was that like they wanted you? Because I'm kind of learning as I talked with more bands in the label that lots was like, oh, we would tour for like 6 months and then we'd start writing the next record. And, in my mind, I just assumed Tooth and Nail bands were just like touring all the time. But, I'm just going off of what I used to see in magazines back in high school and whatever. And so I'm always curious to kind of hear, how that all plays out. Was it just each band kind of figuring out, tour as much as you want or whatever?
I don't think they ever demanded that we toured, but I think we wanted to. I mean, we were 19, 20 years old, getting to do what we wanted to do, what we've been wanting to do for years. And so who wouldn't want to tour a lot? And if you want to make money and you want to be successful, you got to work hard too. So I think we knew that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, good for you guys for having an album that, sounds that good, that they were willing to, take it on. And I can still remember where I was, when I first heard that CD. So I grew up in a really small town. We didn't have a music store there. So whenever we went to visit relatives, 3-4 hours away in a bigger city, I'd get a new CD or whatever. And I got that one, and I can still picture just where I was sitting in my uncle and aunt's, and had my Discman, and just loving it. One thing that really stands out about that album, and like I love CD artwork. That's always something that stands out to me. And I don't know if there's any story behind the CD art of that, because a lot of the bands that Tooth and Nail was signing then, kind of had like a classic looking album cover, and that one was like just a band picture on the front, right? Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Whose idea was it to do that? And I thought that was really cool. Like, it kind of stood out. It's like, because that's another thing I'm kind of nerdy about, is if I get a CD that doesn't have a band picture in it, I'm annoyed by it, just because I like that. And so I was like, oh, they got it right on the front. Like, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a graphic designer, his name is Tim Chiappetta, who was just kind of a fan of the music scene and liked our music. And he's an excellent designer, but he did his stuff pro bono for us. And actually he did all the artwork for all of our previous releases that we did. So he kind of put it together. He would always, kind of come up with mock-ups and stuff and show us, and we liked it and went with it.
Yeah. Well, that was a big, like, often I would just listen to a band just by the way they looked too. So you guys must have looked cool to me as a high school kid. And so, yeah, that's awesome. Do you guys remember what the response was to that album? 'Cause you guys definitely, you fit in with the Tooth and Nail, punk bands, but you also had, a unique sound to you. You're a bit more kind of guitar riffy, and I don't know if that's the Bride influence coming in there or what, but
there's no Bride influence in our music.
No.
Come on.
But I would say, I don't know, Nick, if you want to speak to it. That guitar stuff mostly comes from Nick, and he had a lot of influences that were probably impactful to him growing up.
Yeah. And what was the response to this album? Like, you guys, you're touring hard. How are people, responding to it? Or is it just kind of, shows kind of blend into each other? And
I think it was hit or miss. You'd show up at one place and there'd be 20, 30 people there. And then you show up at the next place, 5 hours down the road, and you got 200 people there. So I thought the response was exciting and great. And for me personally, like crowd size and whatnot didn't really matter that much to me. If there was people there that came because they knew your music and wanted to see you play, that was enough. It was one or two people to put on a show for them.
Yeah, and we did sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah,
I feel like almost all of our shows, we always tried to play the same. Like we didn't, take it back a notch because there was 10 people there. Because we played a lot of shows for 10 people in small towns across the U.S. or big shows. No matter what it was, we were trying to give it our all and put a good show out there.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too that we learned is like, I would have never imagined some of the places, like when you get signed to a record label, that you would be playing across the United States. I mean, it literally spanned the gamut from like, places like that outside that used to be like old, like, trash compacting places. Yeah. Like to like, bars and restaurants in Fort Lauderdale, to people's basements in Grafton, North Dakota. And yeah, I mean, it was kind of really, it was really eye opening and in a good way. But nothing that I would have thought it would have been like when we signed the deal, like you can't even imagine, you couldn't even imagine what it was. So
yeah, you're talking about a H's Cellar in Grafton.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
H's, yeah.
Yeah, that was I mean, that's like pretty close to the Canadian border. Like it's still a ways from where I was, but I went down there for a few shows and
there was a lot
awesome
down from Winnipeg down there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I was gonna say just another kind of thing I had, growing up when I would see, tooth and nail bands in magazines. Like I just assumed every tooth and nail band was huge, and so now as I'm talking with more bands, and I mean I played in a band myself for years, and it's like, okay, just because you're signed doesn't really mean. I mean, it means something, but not what you think it's going to mean. And so I love that, but bands, because we're passionate about playing music, we just go for it, and it's a dream to get to take your music, across, maybe not across the world, but across the United States or whatever. So, but so let's move into Facing Changes a bit. So you guys, you've put out the self-titled record, you're touring hard. Like how does Facing Changes come together? The songs coming together while you're writing on the road. I feel like, so this album's not actually on Spotify, or at least I couldn't find it there. I do have the CD somewhere, but I wasn't able to kind of listen through it fully this week. But I do remember thinking like it kind of had a bit of a shift in sound. I don't know if it was kind of like less riffy, maybe a bit more rock driven. I'd kind of love to hear kind of what went into those songs in that time.
It actually is on Spotify, I'm pretty sure. So maybe you just weren't able to find it.
Oh, well, like I looked up Hangnail and it didn't have, like it had a Transparent and the self-titled one.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, I'll have to look again. Sometimes they're under like a different label or something.
Yeah. So with Facing Changes, we got the opportunity to record at the Blasting Room with Bill Stevenson and Stephen Edgerton. And obviously for a lot of guys in our genre of music, that's kind of like a fantasy come to life type of thing. And I think just if you look at so one thing I think with our first album was kind of self-produced and was pretty raw sounding, and I think the guitars were kind of way out there in front, and so you heard a lot of those riffs and stuff. I think some of those riffs are on Facing Changes as well, but it's just a little more subtle, maybe not as many like full on just lead like guitar parts, but a lot more subtle riffs. But just the whole tenor of that record, for whatever reason, and obviously we loved working at the Blasting Room. We went there for our next record as well. Just had a different vibe to it. And so I think that's part of why people had that perception that maybe it wasn't as guitar driven. To me, I guess I didn't see that. If you were to see us play those songs live, I think they would feel like they had just as much energy and guitar action as some of the stuff on the first record. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, playing the Facing Changes, I think my favorite memories on tour and playing shows was during the facing changes thing, because I think I was and I don't. It's not that I wasn't proud of the other albums, but because we're kind of growing as our following and kind of growing as a band, and I think of kind of where we were at in our careers and like as a band and stuff, that was like kind of all came together at the right time, and the songs were pretty good. They translated live really well. We had fun playing them. There was a really good response on the road. We got to play with some bigger acts kind of on after we recorded that album and toured with some bigger acts. So it was good. That's some of my favorite memories from tour for sure.
And I would say in some ways we probably used Nick as a crutch early on. It was like, okay, we're going to make a song. We're going to do verse, chorus, bridge. Nick, just do a really cool guitar solo so everybody loves it. And then back to the chorus.
Hey man, I just wanted to beat Jackson from Slick Shoes. That's all I wanted to do.
Well, you're there, Nick. I'd say some of your guitar riffs and your solos really put it out there. You impress a lot of people.
I do think the overall songwriting, in my opinion, again, everybody's subject to their own, was a more mature style, I think, on Facing Changes. But like I said, for whatever reason, on that recording, on that album, I don't think it translated well to the recording.
What were you finding was influencing your writing? When you're touring a lot, you're gaining experience, you're playing the same songs night after night. And so going into this album, did you have thoughts of like, we should do this differently, or we should write, this kind of a song? Or how do you guys as a band kind of form those thoughts when you're trying to piece together a new album?
I think at that time, and I don't know if this was more with Facing Changes or Transparent, but I remember Color in the Shape had just come out by Foo Fighters. And for me, at least, and I think for most of us, that was a pretty influential record. I think we wanted to sound like that, but we couldn't sound like that because that's just not who we were.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the ways we would write songs would usually just be jamming, or, Nick comes up with a riff, or I have some kind of chord progression or melody idea in my head, and we kind of just get together and make it happen. So I don't think we were ever necessarily chasing after a style, but I think we were listening to bands like Foo Fighters, and also we were listening to, some of the punk bands and stuff back in the day. But like even bands like Saves the Day and stuff like that, which were kind of like that coming out of punk, post-punk, if you want to say, whatever.
Yeah.
Genre. And so I think we were starting to incorporate some of the maybe darker sounds into our music and some more dissonant progressions and things like that.
I will say that Face to Face live album, I think, played a big influence on us.
I agree.
Yeah, we listened to that album a lot.
Yeah, that's an awesome one. Well, and their newer live one's really good too.
That
Do you
one
remember what Tooth and Nail's reaction was to that album? Like, was there much kind of interaction with them? Like, did you have an A&R guy that was kind of, bouncing ideas off? And I always love kind of hearing, those kind of reactions too. And did they have much thoughts, or were they busy with other bands?
Well, with Facing Changes, we also put out this acoustic EP, which I don't know.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah, touch on that as well.
That was kind of released as a double disc set, and then also on its own. Like, it came free with the first how many ever copies or whatever. And I do remember talking on the phone with Brandon, and he had it on in the background, and he's like, "Oh, this is awesome." He loved the acoustic stuff. So again, I don't know what was going on in his mind, but they seemed to be into it, I think, as far as I knew. But, hard to say.
Yeah, I really liked that acoustic album. Like, I mean, at that point, I wasn't really listening to much acoustic stuff because I just wanted fast punk. But I mean, the guitar playing is so good on that, and I thought that was a cool compliment. My CD is one with the double, and so I definitely had that one. So that was sweet. Did you guys play any of those like at shows, or was that more just kind of for the fans?
I think it was more just for the fun of it. When we were in the studio recording Facing Changes, we'd all hear little parts in our head. Oh, it'd be cool to hear a cello here or this, in this part. And then eventually, excuse me, we got some, other musicians, local musicians that, we're friends with, and we were able to put something together, and it was just more for the fun of it, I think.
And we had, I think what kind of opened our eyes to that we could do that, there was this radio station in town which actually had a pretty wide broadcast range, which they would do these unplugged sets with bands. And so that it kind of forced us to do something acoustic, and we did it, and it sounded pretty cool. And then we did a couple acoustic shows. We did one at a bookstore. We did another one at our home church at the time. And I think with a lot of our different musical upbringings, and including some of the classical influences and stuff like that, it was just a way for us to kind of make music that was outside of just the punk genre. It was kind of fun to translate our songs to that. And a random story I have to share. So one of the fun tours that we had was we did play with Further Seems Forever for a while. And at that time, Chris Carrabba was singing with the band, but right after that tour, I think was when he left the band. Did that even happen midway through the tour or something?
It was like right after, like the week after we stopped, I think, or they left the tour.
Yeah. Because I know we played with them with both singers. Yeah. But anyways, he had started Dashboard Confessional up, and he had called me up and he said, "Hey, can you get me a show in Kenosha?" I mean, he was nothing at the time, and I was like, "Sure." Yeah. So I organized this like show at this real small bar in town.
Starlight Club.
Yeah, he played for like 20 people, you know. Yeah. And that night we were talking till real late at night, and he was like, because we had just put out the acoustic album too. He's like, "You guys need to do a tour where, you know, we'll do an all acoustic tour, and you guys can headline, and I'll open for you." This is Dashboard Confessional.
Yeah, and crazy to think about that now.
Literally a month later, he was selling out the House of Blues in Chicago, like back-to-back nights. Like he blew up so fast. And then like many years later, I went to go see U2 at the United Center in Chicago, and there was Dashboard opening up for U2. And I'm just like standing out in the crowd. I'm like, dude, like we stayed up late at night talking about how you wanted to open for us.
So you were knocking on his door and saying like, all right, time to cash that favor in.
Yeah. Never was really one to be like that. But.
Yeah.
Also their van broke down. Didn't we give them a ride too? They all jumped in our van or something happened, right?
Probably. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, I remember him rolling up to the Starlight Club in like a Toyota station wagon, and he had like a Fender amp and his guitar, and there was like some guy that was with him, and that was it. Like nothing else. Like he was driving around the country, sleeping in his car, like touring.
Yeah. Is that a guy that any of you guys have been in touch with over the years?
Not at all. That was the last I ever talked to him, was when he played in Kenosha.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting how many of those kind of connections, you know, from back then, you know, that the things just kind of shifted in the music scene, and all of a sudden it's like your peer is now this crazy kind of rock star guy, and you know, but he probably still like thinks of you guys here and there, or you know, puts on that acoustic CD, or you know, who knows, right?
I highly doubt that.
What were some of the other kind of standout tours from this time? Like, what were you guys headlining, or were you doing more kind of support tours?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the bigger ones we did was with Brody Hook and Stave Saker.
That one was a lot of fun,
and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, I think, and watching other bands and stuff, I think when you watch Stave Saker live, and like the maturity and the showmanship that they had as a band was just like way and above anything in our genre. Like we all sit together like in the corner of the club and being like, we watched the whole show every night on every tour date. Like there was never a time where we're like, none of us were watching the show. Like it was that good.
Yeah.
And that was like, you know, a month and a half long or something like that. And we'd watch every song of every night of every set. So that was really cool. And they were cool guys, which we all, you know, and I think some of us still keep in touch with some of them. And then, you know, in Brody Hook, the guys are super fun, and you know, they were a great band too. So it was a pretty memorable tour.
Yeah. Side note with Stave Saker, what did you guys think of that Outer Circle punk record that Tooth and Nail put out with Mark Solomon?
You know, I've heard it. I didn't hear it a lot. This style of the music wasn't really my cup of tea, from what I recall.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like super melodic. It was definitely more kind of like he was singing, but it was more towards the kind of hardcore punk style. But anyways, I was never a huge Stave Sticker fan. It was always a bit kind of slow for me, but I really did like that Outer Circle record. That was a cool project. But yeah, well, let's move on to Transparent. So this was a really cool album. I actually just recently listened through it and was just reminded how good it is. You know, there's a lot of great guitar work and vocal melodies on this album. The songs are put together really well, and it was just a really enjoyable listen overall. What do you guys? What kind of thoughts do you have on this album? You know, this album kind of saw, you know, the end of the band. Did those things kind of coincide? Like, did you know when you guys were putting out this album that this would be it?
Yeah. So for me, I think Transparent's by far our best work of music, and it's probably the least known, the least heard. And we recorded it in 2 chunks, and I forgot why that was exactly, but we recorded all of the music in 1 chunk, and that was like, I feel like in the summer, maybe of 2002, and then
Maybe September, maybe.
Okay,
And then September, and then you guys went back at like Christmas time.
Yeah, back out in around December to finish up the vocals and mixing and stuff like that. And I think between that time period was kind of like, I don't think we really knew when we first recorded the first half that the band was going to be over, but I think we did know it by the time we recorded the vocals. And so, and I'll just say for me, I'm a procrastinator when it comes to lyrics, because for one, I don't think I'm the greatest at them. And for two, I'm really picky about them, and I'm never happy with them. And with Facing Changes and with Transparent, like when we got to the studio, I literally probably only had half the lyrics for the songs. So oftentimes I'd be up the night before, like coming up with lyrics and scrambling, you know, because I got to record it the next day kind of thing. But so actually one of the songs on that album is titled In Conclusion. And that song is kind of knowing that the band's coming to an end, you know, and just kind of expressing that. And so, yeah, so to answer your question, we did know that things were kind of coming to an end at that point in time, which is too bad, because we only played 1 show after that album was released. That was our last show at Cornerstone, summer of 2003. Got to play a couple songs, which the funny thing was, when I was doing vocals for that, I knew we would never have to play those songs live. So there was things that either I was singing or the backup vocals I knew we'd never be able to pull off while playing. And so it was interesting trying to put a couple songs. I think we did 3 songs in our last show from that record. It was like, oh man, these songs aren't as easy to play.
I remember thinking after that Cornerstone show, Mike, I was like, why did he make that harmony that weird interval that's so impossible to hit?
Yes.
Because you could. Didn't matter.
Right, because you could in the studio. It was like, I'm never going to have to sing this live, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy going into a record, kind of knowing it's your last. Did that change, you know, like maybe what you wanted to say on it, or was it just, you know, we're going to go into it and just, you know, whatever kind of comes out, not going to kind of think too hard on it?
Yeah, no, I think that was a small part of it. I think it was still being true to who we were, for sure. I think, but though, for sure, I know that because the label knew we were done at that point in time too, and they, you know, had just invested a decent amount of money into that record, and so I think they kind of just shut down promoting it and all kind of marketing and stuff, because there really wasn't a point, because the band wasn't going to exist anymore. And I think that's really why that record really never got to be heard as much as it could have been, and also because we didn't tour on it. I mean, because that's very important, you know, to be able to tour on an album and build excitement that way.
And what brought the end to the band? Like, why was that time the time to be done?
Is this me?
Yeah.
So basically, you know, if you think about it, we were together as a band since 8th grade, you know, so for almost 10 years at that point in time.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, we were like brothers, which we still are today. And so we were very close, but there was also times where there could be interpersonal conflict and stuff. And in some ways we were moving in different directions with maybe our life path, maybe even musical preferences and stuff like that. And so I think things kind of came to an impasse where it was just like, you know, we even talked about this the other night. I think we all have a different perspective of why things ended. some people felt like it was just time to be done. Others wanted to keep going, but it just wasn't to be.
Yeah, no, it's fair. Yeah, lots changes, and I mean, I've heard that with lots of bands, right? You start when, you're young, you don't really know anything. You're just, the world is open, and you just kind of go for it, and then you kind of realize, like, man, this costs a lot of money. This takes a lot of time. This, burns out relationships, and a whole bunch of different things, and so I mean, it sucks to see cool bands come to an end, but I mean, everything can only last for so long, and you don't want to drive it into the ground. It's better to kind of end where things are hopefully still good, and relationships aren't broken and that kind of thing. So
right.
I will say, we all live within a half hour of each other. We do talk often, and we've been good friends ever since we've been 8, 9, 10 years old. Just because we haven't played together in a long time doesn't mean anything really changed in that aspect. But when you're touring for 3 years and you see all your peers are going to college and starting careers and doing all these other things, getting married and starting families, and you kind of think in your head, should we maybe be doing those things too? What if the band doesn't work out? We kind of also need to have a backup plan here. So we were going to college and trying to do those things to have a backup plan.
Yeah, like when the band stopped, we were still, what, we're 22, 23. So we were still pretty young,
Yeah. And also, I mean, we were touring with some bands that had been touring for a long time, and they were still in that same place. You know what I mean? It was like they never really broke through, and were making a really, like a decent living at it. And, they were still touring in a van, and they were still, playing shows for a couple hundred people every night all over the United States. And that was their full-time gig. And I think for some of us, and I don't know if it's just because, how we were raised, or, kind of a Midwest thing. Like, some of us had different ideas as far as careers or backup plans and stuff that we didn't maybe want to leave on the back burner too long, and kind of continue down that path of maybe this doesn't get any better than it does right now, right?
And at that point, like, were you content with what you had done, or did you feel, was there still a part that was like, oh, maybe there's, one more album or one more tour left, or was it just, felt good to just call it quits when it did?
I mean, I don't think it felt good. Maybe to me anyways, it didn't feel good. I mean, because like Mike said, we were all brothers. I mean, that was our life for 3.5 years. And not being able to do that, I mean, that's like a big part of you that goes missing. It's almost akin to, like, having a super serious relationship and then breaking up and then not being able to see that person for a long, forever. Yeah. It's that hard on you. But you get over it, and you become, you're still good friends. So you can see each other. And I think all of us were happy for Nick and his aspirations, and going and, playing for Ace Troubleshooter, and then going on to play with Acceptance and stuff. So we were happy that he was, kind of living his dream. So. Yeah,
right on. I just wanted to briefly touch on the live record that you guys put out a handful of years ago. So that was recorded in 2002, is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
And so what brought that on to release that so many years later? And it sounds good too for being, almost 20 years old.
Yeah, I don't remember really what the motivation behind that was. Other than that, we were kind of into recording stuff at the time, and it was like a lot of bands had live records. It's like, why wouldn't we do a live record? And I think to an extent too, it was like, I don't feel, maybe until Transparent, that any of our records had really captured who we were as a live band. So I think that if somebody were to go listen to that live record, they'd maybe get a better picture of what Hangnail was all about in some ways than listening to some of our studio records. And again, I think we recorded that early December of 2002. So this was right in the middle of all this stuff kind of happening, and the band was breaking up. And I don't know if we even knew for sure at the time when we recorded that was going to happen or not. But again, we put it together. We wanted to pitch it to the label and say, hey, here's a live record. You want to put it out. But they really had no reason to do that, to put any money behind that. And so they kind of said no, and it just kind of sat flat. But then years later, many years later,
Yeah.
16, it was like, hey, we still got this live record. I've showed it to people who are fans before and they loved it. Just want it to be available to people that might get something out of it, might get some enjoyment out of it. And so finally, through a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls, we got permission that we could put it out for free. So it is still available for free on Bandcamp. Thanks to Brandon from Indie Vision Music for helping promote that. And so it's sitting there still. So if you haven't heard that, I'd recommend people go check that out if you're a fan of the band.
Yeah, it's awesome. I still put songs from that CD like on mix CDs because I still like making mix CDs for my band. And there's a great energy about it, and that's awesome that you had that opportunity to share that. It's crazy that it sat there for so long. That would just drive me crazy having a project sitting there for years and years. I guess you just kind of forget about it and leave it there until you have an opportunity. So. But well, one of the reasons why we wanted to record this interview now is because you guys have some exciting news, and so why don't you share what that is and what's going on and kind of this little bit of resurgence with the band.
Yeah, so December 4th we're releasing new music. It's actually a short Christmas project called Christmas Hymns. And where this kind of came about was, for people who don't know, I'm a music pastor at a church. And so Christmas is one of my favorite times of year, just period. I've always loved Christmas, but I love Christmas music. I think you had said, Aaron, you're not a fan of Christmas music, and that's cool too. I know a lot of musicians who don't like Christmas music. But oftentimes I find myself rearranging Christmas songs, and oftentimes I'm digging through the hymnal because, I don't know, I don't like a lot of the new Christian worship stuff. It just all sounds the same. It's kind of boring, but I do like digging into the past and seeing some of these really thought-provoking lyrics that writers put together from years and years ago, and even some of the melodies and chord progressions that they came up with. And so a couple of the songs are well-known songs. "O Come All You Faithful," "O Holy Night." But "One Small Child" and "I Wonder As I Wander" are two Christmas songs that I think many people probably don't know, but have really cool words, cool melodies. And anyway, so as I was arranging these songs for the church, I kind of was like, I wonder what these would sound like if Hangnail were to do these songs. And this started probably 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. So I kind of just recorded some stuff, acoustic guitar and vocal, sent it to the guys. And it really didn't go anywhere. We had like one practice without Nick because he's a busy guy, where we kind of jammed on a couple of these songs. And really what needed to happen was Nick needed to be able to find some time and some desire to record these things. And finally this year he was like, let's do it. So Nick and I basically, one day we pretty much laid all these, built the tracks and put everything down, and then kind of all of us contributed stuff later. But so here we are, the Christmas Hymns project.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, by the time you're hearing this interview, the album will be out, and hopefully you've heard it or will be checking it out soon. Yeah, I will say that, I don't get overly excited about Christmas music, but when you guys said you were releasing something, like, I was definitely intrigued. There's a select few, Christmas projects, like Bad Religion put out a Christmas album a few years ago. That's pretty cool. And like Christmas music kind of goes two ways for me. It's either like I just don't like it at all, or I do like it. And I will say with this, like, you guys have won me over. Like, this is definitely going to be my Christmas soundtrack. And I wish it was longer. 4 songs goes by fast. But I genuinely really enjoyed the songs. They're really upbeat and melodic and catchy. There's really cool like dueling guitar parts on it and vocal melodies and harmonies. And I think you guys did a really good job with it. So are just you a fan of Christmas music, or all of you guys, or were some of you like, I don't know if I can do Christmas music, or was it just kind of a fun project to put together regardless?
I enjoy the Christmas music. I think it's fun to listen to. I got guys at work that listen to it 12 hours a day. I think it can get old after a little while, but the way that these songs are arranged and the way they're done, I think they're more entertaining to listen to. It's not Jingle Bells or Frosty the Snowman. It's a little more mature.
Yeah, sometimes when a band comes back, they don't always sound how you'd hoped. But this, yeah, like I said, this is classic Hangnail songs, and you guys picked really good songs. Another kind of bad cliche with Christmas songs is bands just kind of cover, like the typical ones, and I'm really glad that you guys didn't do that. Like I said, there's a few familiar ones and a few that aren't so familiar. And so how did you kind of go into choosing what songs, when there's only 4, how do you know how did you kind of go about choosing which were going to be the ones that made it?
I literally sat down with a hymnal, paging through page by page with an acoustic guitar and singing it, saying, can this be a cool punk rock Christmas song? And I think there's probably at least 4 other ones that didn't make the cut, but I think still could be kind of cool, but we really just didn't have the time to do all those songs. But yeah, that was how.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, and I will clarify and saying I don't like Christmas music. I really don't like commercial Christmas music. I do like kind of the classic ones. One aspect I love about the songs you picked and some of those older ones is they kind of have this really cool kind of somber and melancholy feeling to it, and maybe they're more songs in kind of a minor key. But in saying that, you guys added a lot of really cool melodic elements to the songs, and I just think you did a really great job, and so that's really cool. How did it come to to put it on Tooth and Nail? Like they were cool, just sending again someone saying, "Hey, this is done. If you want to put it out, it's just a fun project. There's not there's no contracts or all this kind of back and forth." How did that come about?
Well, I mix a lot of songs. Well, not a lot of songs, but I mix some songs for BEC Tooth and Nail. I just for this, I think we had. Well, we were gonna do it. We were gonna put it out ourselves, and so we had like one song kind of almost done, and I just decided to shoot it over to my guy over at Tooth and Nail, and I just said, hey, I'm assuming you have no interest in touching this record. And I sent him the first song, and then he came back and he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we can do this," So they were into it. So it was just one email that I shot out, and they were into it,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, if you still have that connection, and what's so nice now, like with streaming, it's not like they need to, print thousands of CDs and distribute it and try and sell it. It's just kind of putting their name on it and getting it out there. So yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about it. And was there a reason why it hasn't been, I mean, by this time people will know about it, but what's been the process of being like, okay, we got to get this out by Christmas, but we haven't announced anything yet? What's going on with that?
Well, part of it was, man, when did we start recording this? Mid-November. This whole thing happened so quickly. Yeah. We probably should have been recording this a lot earlier. So part of that was our fault. The other part is the label just hasn't been ready to announce it yet from a promotion standpoint. And so it should be any day, hopefully now, as we record this podcast. And like you said, it'll already be past the point it's released by then. But yeah, so we're kind of scrambling to get this out there, but hopefully it'll get out there in time for Christmas and help make people's Christmas a little bit more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right on. Is there any thoughts or talks? Has this sparked, interest to maybe write more Hangnail music, or was this just kind of a one-time project and, life's too busy with other things? Or if there was a chance for that, what could or would more Hangnail music look like? Are you still kind of have the same influences, and would you still want to kind of release something in the punk genre? Even if it's just hypothetical speaking, it's always cool just kind of hearing where people are at and, what's inspiring them musically.
Mike,
who wants to go?
Yeah. So the answer is we don't know for sure. We have some rough ideas of some songs in the works. Honestly, part of it will be, does anybody care about this new music that we're putting out? If there's some excitement with it, we feel like it's worth putting some time into it, we'll probably, do something. Obviously, it would be difficult to put together a full-length album. I mean, we all have young kids, working spouses and all that kind of stuff. And so life is just absolutely chaotic, and it's hard to even imagine the time it would take to put together a record right now. But yeah, potentially, we're leaving the doors open. Put it that way.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, well, even just to release a fun Christmas project, right? You still get to hang out, play music, and put something else out there. So that's awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up here, but I wanted to end on just asking you guys, if there's one thing you kind of came away with your time in Hangnail, like maybe it's one specific memory or kind of anything. When you look back at your time in the band, what's kind of one thing that really stands out to you? Or if that's too hard, multiple things, or maybe it's the relationships or the music part, or
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
anything.
I was going to say the relationships. I've known these guys longer than I've known anyone except my family, and we've been through a lot together. Bands breaking down and sleeping in some really sketchy places, and playing shows in some really crazy places. But I wouldn't change any of it, and so I would say, just the things I've learned from the other three guys and hanging out with them all this time. I wouldn't take any of that back.
Mm-hmm.
Right on.
And for me, it was just the overall experience. When you ask the question, like, were we asked to tour more or whatever, it's like, to be that age and not have a care in the world, to jump in a van and just travel the country, expenses paid, was such an adventure, in some of the best days of my life, honestly. And so I think we had to kind of grow up fast in a sense too, because, it's not just like, oh, we're renting an apartment or something now. It's like, no, we joke around, like we didn't have like GPS and stuff back then. So we had the big old atlas map, and you got to like try to figure out where you're going and how you're going to eat and all that kind of stuff, where you're going to sleep. And, our van broken down in the side of the road. And luckily Jacob was a mechanic. And so oftentimes, he'd be like ripping parts out of the engine, on the road, and just all the fun, crazy experiences, things we probably couldn't even or shouldn't even talk about here on the podcast. Just good fun times. And, I think it kind of built into each of us who we are today, as people, as parents, and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to follow you two guys because you encapsulated it very well. But I think memories and not having any regrets. I think all of us were really blessed to have parents that were supportive of us. I think that's one thing too that probably in the early stages of the band kind of gets looked over, is like, kind of without them, it really probably wouldn't have happened the way it did. They were super supportive. And even my parents were probably the most conservative of the group, from a, like, oh, you're never going to be able to make it. You're not going to make any money. We want, you got to go to college. You've got to get a good job. You got to do that. And they were like, yeah, no, if you're going to do it now. And so we were all very blessed to have very supportive parents. I mean, we practiced in Jacob's basement at his parents' house from when we were 14, 15 years old until the end. I mean, that's where a lot of the songs were written there for all the albums. So I think having the parents that we did really, really helped along the way, for sure.
Yeah. Good support system in a band is huge for sure. Yeah. How about you, Nick?
I mean, those guys pretty much summed it up. That's all there. I mean, for me, too, like I've been blessed I was on the ride with Hangnail, then I was on a ride with Acceptance for 4 years. So I was just kind of like back to back on the road for like almost 7 years of my life. So it's just, from what they've just said, it was the same thing with Acceptance. Relation. Even 23, I was 22, 23 in Acceptance up until 26, somewhere near 27. And still, like, I came home from Acceptance and lived with my parents for like 2 years. I was 28, like I was like almost 30 years old. So yeah, I'm thinking about it now, like, thinking about my kid, if my kid wanted to be in a band, and go on tour, I'm just like, what do you think? It's hard. So yeah, the parents was that was a huge thing, man. I don't know how they accepted us to do that, but that's unreal, But
knowing what we know now, I think it would be hard to maybe encourage our kids to do it as much, but at the same time, I would want them to have the experience that we had.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
Yeah, awesome, guys. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This has been so much fun, and I'm sure there's lots of other things we could talk about, but I'm sure we're all tired here and put kids to bed. And yeah, appreciate the time and excited for you guys having new music out. And I'm going to be rocking that here for the next month or so, and we'll see if I allow myself to listen to Christmas music past Christmas. But what's cool about these songs, especially the two middle ones that I wasn't as familiar with, like they're not even necessarily like as Christmassy. So maybe those two will fly for the rest of the year, and then I'll just put the other two on just at Christmas. No, that's super excited about that, and excited to see it announced and for people to hear it and to check this out and to maybe kind of reconnect with your music. So there's lots of really cool stuff in there. So thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron.